All right, so I see our attendees are coming into the session, so we'll give everybody just a few more seconds to kind of come in before we get started. But while we wait, for those of you that are here, we would love to know where you are joining us from and what the weather is like where you're at. So feel free to use the chat functionality and tell us where you're listening from today and what your weather is like. I am Samantha. I am in New Jersey. Today our high is 34 degrees. So quite different from the weather of Scott and Thailand. What's it like in Hawaii today?
78 degrees, blue skies,
All right, so
light trade winds.
you all might win for the best weather today.
We probably do.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So to everybody joining us today, good afternoon. And for those of us joining from Hawaii, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I am thrilled to be joined by a fantastic group of construction professionals. First, we have Scott Ie. He is the Vice President of Beachside Roofing. And Tylin Ie, oh goodness, drawing a blank. McMonigal, is that correct?
Yes,
Correct.
correct.
All right. And she is the project and VisCom manager at Beachside Roofing. And we were going to have a third speaker today, Tyler Mathis. He's the channel manager and business development expert with My CRE Cloud. Unfortunately, he is under the weather today, so we are going to be chipping in and filling in for him. But today we're going to talk about how Beachside Roofing has transformed its operations by moving their instance of Sage to the cloud, as well as adopting ProNovos. So before we get started, not only do we want to know where you're dialing in from, but we're also curious to know what sector of the construction industry are you in? Are you a general contractor, specialty, offering a professional service as one of the industry partners? And then also, what instance of the ERP are you using? Are you joining because you're interested in Sage? Are you using another ERP and you're just curious about Beachside's technology journey? So give everybody a few minutes to share that information with us. And I am seeing a lot of early results for Sage 300 users. So got a couple of foundation software users as well as Spectrum too. So good. So it looks like you all are in the right place. And even if you are, not using Sage, you're definitely going to get a lot out of how Beachside is using technology and some tips and tricks that they have to share with us today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So let me switch screens. So Scott, when it came to where you guys were at, and before you invested in all the new technology, can you share with those listening today some of the team's biggest challenges?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that we had was just in our top leadership. Our company is 40 years old, started by our boss who came to Hawaii to surf. And after doing surfing for a couple of years with a best buddy, they decided that they needed to work to subsist. And so they started a roofing company. And here we are 40 years later. We've grown to the largest commercial roofing contractor in Hawaii. We're about $45 million strong annually. And that's a completely different company than the one our boss started. So you can imagine as we talk about technology and about the improvements that we need to make in our business, the paradigm between the leadership that started our company and where we need to go has completely changed. And so technology like cloud-based solutions are so ambiguous and very difficult for us to wrap our head around. And so those were some of the early challenges that we had to overcome before we started our journey.
Yeah, so thinking back 40 years ago, I mean, ERPs being on-premise was the norm, and you did not have construction technology solutions like ProNovos to make it easier to give everybody visibility into the data. So I think that those are some of the biggest barriers you're trying to overcome, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so prior to using a solution like ProNovos, which helped you give everybody visibility into project data, I'm assuming that you fell into the category of several people in the construction industry, and maybe some of those are listening today, that you relied heavily on Excel for your financial reporting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And how did relying heavily on Excel impact your decision making?
Well, it wasn't just on financial reporting. In order for us to see and gain our bearing on where we are on projects at a granular level, we needed to export lots of data and massage it before we could see what was going on and make decisions. And so that really slowed down the decision-making process. It goes without saying that financial reporting was also very challenging to ensure that we synced up all of the data in a spreadsheet that really displayed exactly what was going on in our organization.
And when you were in Sage, when you were trying to find your revenue versus your job costing, was that easy?
It was not easy. Sage is very good at reporting it at a macro level, so job as a whole. And we weren't able to get down into the details very easily without running multiple reports and transferring data to spreadsheets to be able to make good, solid decisions.
And I think that this might look a little bit familiar to you. This is a screenshot of kind of how you're able to access this now in ProNovos. So taking all those different data points and combining them for you, as opposed to what you were doing previously in Sage, where you would have to go through and do all this manual work in order to get this output. Is that correct?
Yeah, without a doubt, yes.
And Thailand, from your perspective, how did this gap in technology impact the ability for different departments to collaborate? And what was the overall impact on the daily operation?
Yeah, so accounting is looking at the earn percent complete, or the percentage of earn complete, and then the project teams are more focused on the percentage of build complete. So there's a discrepancy there where our earn to complete, if the cost to complete's not getting updated and we can't see that in real time, our earn to complete might not look the same. So that has been kind of understating our backlog. And so we're not able to collaborate between departments. Like for our estimating team, for example, if our earn percentage complete is overstated and our, excuse me, if our earned percentage complete is overstated and our backlog is understated, then our estimating team in turn might become more aggressive at the way that we bid work. So that communication gap, closing that gap is super important to us.
May I add something to that, Samantha?
Absolutely.
Sure. So yeah, what Thailand is really focusing on is the difference between the way that we see the reports that just come out of vanilla Sage or anywhere, what we've earned complete. And that's a function of what we forecast as our cost to complete and how much we've spent on a project. And project teams are often looking at the percentage that they build on a project. And that discrepancy sometimes is far and wide. We've had instances where we're looking at our data and what Thailand is referring to is our backlog or our billings remaining. We've had a discrepancy bottom line of over $10 million because of all of the adjustments that need to be made on jobs. And if you're looking at planning for your business and planning for cash flow, to have that large of a discrepancy is very difficult to manage through. And so that was one huge communication gap that this helped us to bridge straight away. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, and $10 million, that's not a small number. So I could only imagine the frustrations that might have caused amongst the different departments, as well as with your leadership team as well, feeling like the left doesn't know what the right is doing.
Right.
Well, now that we understand some of these challenges, let's jump into the solution. And this is where we were going to chat with Tyler about you all moving your instance of the Sage to the cloud. So I'm going to kind of ask you some of these questions. one of the things that we talked about when it comes to the cloud is ease of access and increased security. And so, is this something that you all found as a value add when it came to moving your ERP to the cloud?
Yes, it's been beautifully simplified.
Mhm.
So we used to get to our Sage data by logging on through a VPN. And for whatever reason, the VPN solutions we used didn't really have a good track record of being online all the time when we needed it. Now we have one logon to get to our Sage cloud information, and it hosts our instance of Sage there, and we can get to it from anywhere in the world, from any device at any time. And that for us is really a game changer.
I might add that we just tried this last week or around Christmas in Whistler, and we were able to access Sage via the cloud. There was no stress with being able to get there through the VPN. And, you know, it was less of a nightmare because we could access our data whenever we needed it.
So from Hawaii to Whistler, been able to access your data with zero problems. So people being able to go to the job sites, let's say there's something that they need to check in the ERP, they could very quickly access it from the job site with no issues.
Yes, truly.
Wow. Well, that is definitely a strong argument for why you'd want to move it into the cloud. So Scott, you've had your on-premise hosting of Sage. I'm assuming things were going well for quite some time. So what was the point that made you realize it was time for a change? Like, was there a specific tipping point for you all?
Well, there was one, but we had the normal decision-making process. At what point do we want to sort of take our business from being hosted on premise to the cloud to give us this enhanced accessibility? And that really was one of the primary drivers. We wanted that, and we wanted to be able to collaborate in real time wherever anyone was at. We wanted to be able to give them the flexibility to do that for us. We also wanted to eliminate the data management and backup of that data. We had multiple solutions to make sure that we kept all of our data safe, and we wanted to reduce the dependency on hardware. So those were the primary drivers. So we got to a point last year where our servers were old enough that we could not upgrade to the latest version of Sage. And I think that was the real tipping point where we said, this is decision time. We either buy new hardware or we make the jump now. And we're glad we made the jump to the cloud.
So I'm assuming that you might have, based on our earlier poll, a lot of peers listening who might be finding themselves in the same situation that you all were in. So for those that are on the fence about switching to the cloud, what advice do you have for them?
Oh, yeah. Well, I talked a little bit about our VPNs being very finicky, but the migration to the cloud was virtually painless. And I see virtually painless because it didn't cause me any pain, but I'm sure it caused Tyler and his team some pain to make sure they did it. But they did it overnight. I went to bed one night and we were accessing Sage via our VPN. I woke up the next morning, hit a web link, and there it was in all its glory, exactly like I expected to see it. The other thing that we love about Sage is its scalability. If I add an employee, I add a seat, I give them a logon, and they've got everything, the latest software, the latest versions, and access to everything that they need. It's no longer tied to a piece of hardware I need to set up. It's very easy to scale our business. It increases the collaboration because we all look at the same data in real time. And the other benefit that we've learned recently is our Sage instance, our Sage Cloud instance, is hosting our estimating software as well. And so we've managed to take some on-premise software and host it in the cloud as one sort of gargantuan solution for us. And we couldn't be happier having made that move.
And Tylen, I know in our conversations and preparing for this, you had made a comment that I thought was really interesting. As you said, it's more of a nightmare not being able to access your data. Can you expand upon that and share that with those listening today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a subcontractor and we do several hundreds of projects a year. And so, our project managers have multiple projects with multiple billing dates, and that allows them to stay on top of their billings no matter where they are. They have the flexibility to access Sage anywhere.
And so when it comes to like being able to have that real-time data, and I know that was a big driving factor for you all with your technology evolution. So having access to real-time data, how has that helped you all in regards to making better decisions and bridging that gap between your accounting team and your operations team?
Well, I can say that my project teams really enjoy having access to Sage everywhere. Where we were strapped to our desks, if they wanted to go out and resolve an inventory discrepancy on a project, they'd end up printing all of the documents they thought they might need to prepare for a job site inspection, and then they take those paper documents and try to figure out what was going on. Today, they can walk out with an iPad, open it up, and take a look at the data in Sage in real time, and they never miss anything that's available to them. And so that's really improved their ability to resolve issues. They can see it in real time, what's going on. Those are just some of the benefits that we see from having Sage accessible everywhere.
Yeah, and to add to that, ProNovos allows us to update on a more granular level in real time. So we can keep up with our job cost to complete in real time by phase and get ultra specific with documenting and logging that info in. So it empowers our project managers to, get engaged with their details and helps us see that actual earned revenue at a I guess more updated.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So this is an example of a few of the tools and features that you are using in ProNovos. And I know one thing that you had shared was, prior to, hooking ProNovos up almost as like a supercharger for your instance of Sage, the data would be stale because of the way you had to disseminate it to your project team. So you had Sage on premise, so it wasn't accessible there. And then everybody's printing things out. And so now by having access to these different features, you were sharing with us in our kind of practice calls that one of the benefits is everybody's looking at the same data at the same time. So can you talk about, either highlighting anything on the screen? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what does that mean for you all to be having this conversations all from the same perspective?
Well, I could say that this dashboard, the graphic on the left that shows just this sort of mountain chart is extremely powerful, an extremely powerful tool. That one looks great. We've seen mountain charts that have costs that exceed both the build and cash received to date. And just that visual cue tells us that this is very important for us to take action on. And it wasn't always readily apparent in flat data. And so those tools are powerful. Visualization tools and dashboarding has really changed the way that we connect with our data on sort of this mental level. And it really is a call to action in many cases, which has improved our ability to communicate between teams and accounting.
And I think you said something that's really important too, is, making it, the data visualization, making it easy for everybody to understand, I mean, it's, I have been working, in the world of construction financial management going on 7 years. And so I've seen a lot of WIP reports and a lot of spreadsheets, and, you look at it and it's just a sea of numbers. And I think even the most trained construction financial professional, you can only process numbers so quickly, whereas the brain processes images and graphics substantially faster. And so I think that this serves twofold, right? One, you can it's a visual at a glance where your brain can decide to what to focus in on, but also those who maybe don't have an accounting degree or are not super savvy in the world of construction financial management, it helps them process information in a way that isn't just numbers and rows and columns. Would you agree with that?
Yes, 100%.
So for any of you looking to help increase your project manager's financial acumen, finding a solution with data visualizations is going to be really powerful for that.
We can't understate the importance of those tools. in today's economy. Yes.
Agreed. But as we know, change is never easy. So even though you might have the best solution that looks amazing and is going to make people's lives easier, you're likely still going to hit some resistance. And so, Scott, let's talk about how you all handled that. When it came to rolling out both Sage in the cloud as well as ProNovos, did you encounter any resistance from your team?
So I wouldn't characterize it as resistance, Samantha. You know, I think the first thing is us as leaders, we need to be sensitive to change, and that fear of the unknown is really what underlays a lot of change initiatives. And so it's our job as leaders to make sure that we tee it up for our teams in a meaningful way, that and connect them to the results and improvements that they're going to see from trusting us. So that's the first thing is really important. The second thing is, folks have comfort with the status quo. And, up until we had many of these visualizations, the status quo was a whip report that was so large and unwieldy that there was very little accountability in the actual numbers. And so to go from that environment to one where we start to look at it somewhat granularly at the job level and see these insights, that really challenged the status quo in the way we talked about it. Of course, there's the accountability that comes with seeing this information that was, again, I don't believe that that's resistance. And so as leaders, really as leaders, it was our job to build confidence in these tools, to make sure that they understood that this was, we were coming at this from a way that was going to help our company get to the next 40 years. And that's, that is our goal. That is our mantra. And that's how we continue to roll out the use of ProNovos in our business. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're mentioning the rollout because you shared something with me that I think is absolutely brilliant. Could you talk about the tiered approach that you took with the rollout of ProNovos?
So I'd love to. The tool that we thought we would get the most bang for the buck with is the job review tool. And that's because it starts with a report like the WIP. We can see something at a management level that we want to dive into. We can click into that job, and the job review tool gives us this systematic way to go through all of the parts of a job at a very granular level, at the phase and cost code and cost type level, really down to the nitties and the gritties. The beauty is, as we go through these items and we make changes together, we get a commitment from our teams and we document it in a very systematic way. And that really is a way for them to understand how important it is to manage all of the parts that results in well-performing jobs. And so what we did was we started with our largest jobs, the ones that were over $1 million. We said those would be the targets, and that's where we'll get the most bang for the buck from. And then we used and developed procedures with our strongest teams. And after that, we leveraged those strongest teams to help us train the rest of our population. And that's the process we're in right now.
So this seems like it's a masterclass in patience because I could see the urge to want to roll this out to everybody all at one time and get instant results. But the approach that you all are taking is one that is slow and steady. Would that be correct way to put it?
It is, yes.
So you pick the most significant jobs, you're working with your strongest teams, you're learning as you go. And while all of this is happening, how are you actually training and helping your team to adjust to this new technology?
We're going through the job reviews and developing the procedures that accompany the job reviews. We're developing them together. So they have a say in what these will look like into the future. So it's a collaborative effort. The implementation ends up being collaborative. Yeah.
But it's not just collaborative. When you do it in a job review way, we can take an individualized approach as well. So each team can attack it without fear of being judged by another team of where their weak points might be. So it's both a tiered approach and an individualized approach so that we can strengthen those team members without them being too afraid to ask the questions they need to ask when we train
And
them.
and I
Yeah.
have to give you guys, huge kudos for that. Because again, it's patience and it's time, and you're investing time up front to make sure that you set your teams up for long-term success. And a lot of times people will look at technology like a magic wand. If you remember the movie Field of Dreams, the build it and they will come. That is not how it works when it comes to technology and training people within technology. So for anybody listening here today, whatever technology it is that you're going to buy, um, don't expect within, I'd even say, you know, 6 months for this to be perfectly operating and functioning, because there's so many elements. You've heard them talk about the culture, you've heard them talk about the training, you're developing new processes and procedures. Like, you didn't get here overnight, and so you can't expect change overnight. So that is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give people is to have patience, trust the process, listen to your team, get feedback, and work with them along the way so they feel like they're a part of this change, as opposed to change being, shoved down their throat.
Right.
Was so when it came to working with individuals, Tylen, was there a learning curve that you guys found? Because not only are they using a new technology, and some of them are probably very, very experienced and good at their jobs and used to doing it one way. So now you're giving them this tool that opens up this whole new world of accessibility to data and looking at things through a different lens. So what did you guys experience when it came to a learning curve?
So each person has a different learning curve, but what ProNovos helped us with was that those visualizations. So
Mhm.
it made it easier for them to understand the data that they were already inputting in Sage. And, you know, attacking those learning curves, some people might need some extra time, and ProNovos has a ton of different tools available both on their website. We worked with an implementation manager that worked really well for us. The biggest thing was kind of navigating the tool,
Mhm.
and there are a bunch of helpful trainings in ProNovos's website, and we utilized our implementation manager pretty heavily when we got started on our side.
Makes sense. I have a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to jump over to these real quick since we're kind of talking about these right now. So, Scott, we have a question for you. Someone asked, how long did it take once you connected Sage to ProNovos to start getting these charts and dashboards?
So I would say that it took about 2 weeks of going back and forth with our ProNovos implementation team. And what we did was we connected data and then we ran it on our end and compared it to Sage. And we went back and forth for 2 weeks until we got everything reporting the way that we expected it. And that to me was very quick. The team was
Yeah.
highly responsive, and surprisingly, Bruce Orr, the chief data scientist, was involved in ensuring that got done in an expeditious manner. It was a very good process for us.
And to anybody listening, the reason why we do this QA is because I'd say that whatever ERP you're with, there's a standardization of how you all are using it. That's about 80% the same. There's this 20% variance with how people use their ERP systems that we need to vet out and make sure that the way in which you're using tables and your reports are all pulling into the automated workflows that we have in ProNovos. So we really do want to set everybody up for success early on, which is why we spend a lot of time doing the QA and making sure that the way in which you're utilizing your ERP is in alignment with these automated workflows.
Right. And Samantha, just to add one quick thing, many, many years ago, our company worked with the Sage consultant who actually modified the code to sort of get Sage to do something that was a little more aligned with the way they saw the business being done. And that modification has persisted in our Sage for more than 20 years. And it was just things like that just needed to be worked around and understood from your team for them to completely connect the data. And once they did, it works beautifully.
Well, then that's a perfect transition into like the results that you've seen. So
Okay.
Scott, let's talk about that. What are some of those specific improvements that you've seen since, using MyCRE to take your instance of Sage to the cloud and then leveraging ProNovos to get stronger construction intelligence?
Well, it goes without saying, we've talked about it, and we really talk about it all the time. Having access to our tools anywhere is really game changing for us. I mean, it gives us flexibility to do what we need to do in our professional and personal life without worrying about whether we're going to be able to get to it and get to our things on time. It really brings a lot of flexibility. Leveraging the ProNovos tool, we save a lot of time by not having to massage our data just to gain our bearing. We have ready tools and analytics that we can rely on and call on to give us the lay of the land. It really promotes real-time decision-making, especially when we leverage dashboards and KPIs like we looked at. There are forecasting tools there on a project level, which roll up into revenue and cash flow forecasts, which we're working to figure out how to use in our business to be better at it. Those tools are things that are on our short-term radar. And the accountability and transparency of jobs has improved just dramatically, with everyone having ready data and us looking at the same thing at the same time. So those are just some of the things that we experienced.
Interesting. And we had a question come in as you were talking about that is, how did moving Sage to the cloud change the way in which your team approached communication?
Well, I can say that it eliminated a lot of phone calls and emails for people that were away from the office that needed to get information printed up or exported and sent to them. Everyone has access to everything that they need from everywhere. And that in and of itself has dramatically reduced redundant communication.
So you guys have been in business now for 40 years. Started
Yeah.
off as a side hustle in order to ensure that your founder could continue surfing in Hawaii. So
Indeed.
now, now that you all you've experienced the first 40 years, what's on the horizon for the next 40 years? How do you guys plan on transforming Beachside Roofing?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to bring everybody up to the current technology. I think that's the goal. Our short-term goal is to ensure that everyone understands the tools that they have and how to best utilize them. And we think that if we do that and we keep investing in our employees and our technology, that will be, the driver that takes us to the next 40.
Love that. So we're coming to the end, but for those of you still hanging around, Scott had mentioned Bruce Orr. So Bruce is our founder, but he's also our chief data scientist. He's a classically trained data scientist. So for today's webinar, if anybody is interested in seeing ProNovos for yourself, I'm going to launch a poll. You can ask Scott. We are a very low pressure company. We are not here to force anybody into anything. Truly here to help. I want to make things easier. So if you are interested in having a conversation, asking us some questions, and just seeing what the solution looks like for your company, go ahead and let us know, and we can reach out and set that up. And then another unique thing that we do that I think is pretty cool is we do what's called a data sync demo. So after you have decided, like, yep, this is really cool, I'd like to see more, we will actually take your data, put it into ProNovos, so you can actually see what ProNovos looks like with your data, as opposed to what some other software companies do, where they'll use a pristine demo environment. So it'll give you a little bit stronger insights in regards to the decision that you're going to make in the investment in technology. So let's I'm going to leave the poll up for a minute, and then let's transition on. We have a couple more questions for the group. So this one I'm smiling at because I have heard this time and time again. So this one said, my boss is old school and doesn't want to switch to the cloud because he thinks the cloud will be easier to hack. He doesn't understand security and how the cloud works. He's just paranoid. Any advice on what I could say to be open to the idea of moving Sage to the cloud? So Scott, in your experience, did you encounter any hesitation with moving to the cloud, or have you heard this before where people think the cloud is less secure?
I think we used to hear that years ago, but the cloud is almost ubiquitous with all kinds of software and solutions today. So I think the transition was much easier for us to take today than it would have been 5 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. And then, Helen, I think this is one's for you. They said you mentioned challenges with tracking percentage of project completions. How does having real-time data now help resolve those discrepancies, and what impact has that had on project outcomes?
Yeah. So ProNovos actually gives us the tools in our job reviews and or just going through the job outside of that monthly review that we're doing to address and document the cost to complete in real time and on a granular level. I think Scott mentioned that, and I might have touched on it again, but this helps to keep our team engaged in all the nitty-gritties and all the details and produces better results because they're more engaged in the project and they're keeping up with that cost to complete.
So Samantha, one of the things that we like to do when we're looking at data, in spite of the fact that we haven't rolled out ProNovos and our job review for all jobs, is we like to start with a report of all of the projects a project manager might be managing. And then we like to sort the report by their over and under billing. And those will start some really good discussions. We can click right into that job and see the underlying data. And we may not review every one of those jobs, but we review enough of the information for that project team to understand that action needs to be taken. And so, ideally, we want all jobs to be done in some systematic way, but we're realistic in that they all can't. But we give them these tools and triggers, and we empower them to understand that action needs to be taken. And we see teams come back to us and say, how do I resolve this? And other teams take the action themselves, and we give them the old attaboy. That's a good job.
That's really cool. So you're seeing, as a result of using something like ProNovos, like this natural autonomy amongst your project teams, where they're starting to not wait to be told to do something, but they're doing it on their own because they're seeing these trends and patterns.
Right. They know exactly what we're going to do. So, they can forecast what we're going to talk about, and they can head it off at the pass, so to speak.
Oh my gosh, that must be like a breath of fresh air, especially, for those leading those project review teams. So instead of feeling like you're prying information out of your project teams, they're coming to you and they're leading those conversations, and they're saying like, hey, I'm noticing this, but here's what I'm going to do in order to circumvent this, or here's what we're going to do to get this back on track. So they're being a lot more proactive. Very cool.
Absolutely.
So we have another question. This one says, is ProNovos a good substitute for using spreadsheets? We get monthly job cost updates from our field team, and it takes hours to decipher them to update our WIP schedule.
That might be a little difficult because we don't understand what information that you're looking at. But I can say that I use Excel 90% less to do exactly what I was doing and can feel comfortable about it.
All right. And then I have one final one. I hope I'm going to read this and we'll see if you guys understand it. It said, how do you manage getting the projections you establish with your team in ProNovos back into your ERP?
So we do enter that information manually. So, but what ProNovos does is it gives us a history of exactly what we were thinking about at a very granular level, and that becomes the data input information that we take back to Sage.
Perfect. Well, I don't see any more questions. So to everybody listening today, thank you so much for those great questions. And a special thank you to Scott and Kylan. It has been a pleasure learning more about the business and, learning about your journey. And I hope that those listening today also took a few takeaways in regards to, either investing in the technology or how you overcome the resistance to change with new technology. And to Tyler, we wish you a speedy recovery. We're sorry you couldn't be here today. But if you guys have any questions for Scott, Tylin, or Tyler, or myself, our contact information is on the screen. And if you're ready to take the next steps towards modernizing, your construction intelligence and getting better control over your data, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll also be sending you all a recording of this webinar. So if you'd like to listen to it or share it with leadership teams, we encourage you to do so. So that's all I have. Any final words, Scott or Tylen?
I don't think so. Stay warm.
All right. Thank you so much. And to everybody else, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next month for our next webinar.
Thanks,
All right.
Samantha.
Thanks, Samantha.
Bye, everyone.